Chapter 4 20 minutes after landing in the Dominican Republic, the agents were in a cab navigating the dusty Santo Domingo streets. Low-rise buildings splashed with pastel pink and peppermint green sailed by on either side. Squat palm trees separated lanes of traffic. Scooters wove in and out of traffic on the congested roads. They arrived at the harbor where the helicopter awaited. Malik tipped the driver with a crisp $100 bill and kept another $100 out for the helicopter pilot. He wasn't quite clear on South American tipping etiquette and how it differed from the United States, but it seemed only fair that if he tipped the bloke driving a cab, then the pilot deserved a few quid as well. "I assume you won't need a parachute for this mission," Malik shouted over the roar of the rotating blades. "You'll probably get lucky and land in the yacht's hot tub." "That's not how probability fields work," Seifert shouted back. In addition to the blades, their conversation was being drowned out by the traffic at their backs and the waves crashing the shore precariously close to the helipad. They stepped over the landing skids and into the passenger seats. The pilot, a tanned, husky gentleman with an epic silver mustache and a white linen shirt, turned to his passengers. The agents nodded and he raised his thumb. The door slid shut. "How does your probability field work?" Malik said. "If you don't mind me asking." "How does your immortality work?" Seifert asked in response. He had an irritating habit of answering a question with a question. Malik slid on his headphones and adjusted the mic. Much easier to converse when you're not competing with the relentless whump, whump, whump of the blades, and the engine sounded like a swarm of wasps nesting in a megaphone. "Immortality isn't a gift," Malik explained. "It's a curse. I wouldn't pass on the secret to eternal life even if I could, which I can't." Malik had come to be transmogrified the same way most others had. A tattoo was inked onto his shoulder, a sigil, which was the first step to becoming a magic practitioner. Years of study had yielded some results, but aside from a few harmless somatic gestures, he wasn't able to conjure anything of value. You can only light a cigarette with a snap of your fingers so many times before you start hungering for a more substantial piece of the ethereal pie. He wanted more, and he wanted a shortcut to get there. With his family's considerable estate at his disposal, he traveled the world in search of artifacts. Malik eventually found what he'd been looking for, the fabled Invictum amulet, shimmering and all-consuming, brimming with possibilities. He'd asked the universe for power, and the universe obliged. Unfortunately, the no-refund policy wasn't marked on the label. Magic came prepackaged with varying degrees of consequences and a myriad of side effects. But of all the undesirable byproducts associated with magic, living with secrecy was the one brutal constant. Don't tell your loved ones what you've been tinkering with. You'll put them in harm's way. Any scrivener will pass that advice along to their apprentice, and for good reason. Even more important, don't give your enemies even a morsel of critical information, and almost anyone can be considered an enemy on any given day. "So you do know how it works," Seifert said, eyebrows raised. His curiosity seemed legitimately piqued for the first time since their briefing earlier that day. "It's all up here." Malik clacked his manicured fingernail against his headset, roughly where his temple would be located. "Trust me, you don't want to see the horrors I have locked in my cerebral cortex." Seifert stared back for a very long, very awkward moment. "Nice talk," he grumbled. Then his eyes fell shut. "Wake me up when it's time to jump." The red H, encompassed by a circle, shrunk beneath them, and the ocean waves winked up diamonds of sunlight. The helicopter buzzed along for 20 minutes until a yacht appeared on the horizon. Even from a distance, it was massive, like a floating strip mall. The shimmering white monstrosity had 4 levels, a sea-level deck outfitted for jet skis, and a helipad of its own. A nighttime raid would have been daring, and more than a little dramatic. Malik imagined black parachutes deploying at low altitude, a grappling hook to scale the side of the yacht, and a SEAL team as backup. Sadly, none of the theatrics were necessary, Not to mention, Malik had neglected to pack his favorite grappling hook. He asked the pilot to land on the helipad. The blades slowed to a crawl, and Malik stepped onto the deck, dashing in his three-piece suit. Seifert stepped out behind him, aviator glasses in place, decked out in a gray three-piece of his own. To a casual observer, they probably looked more like a high-end cologne commercial than law enforcement. A trio of men in camouflage greeted them. Dominican military, perhaps, bearded and strapping, showing off both their biceps and their assault rifles. It was a gun show in more ways than one. "State your business," one of them barked, and then turned to the others, mumbling in Spanish. "We're here to arrest a man by the name of Colby Finn," Malik said. He held out a hand level with his chin. "About this tall, dark hair, looks like he's perpetually nursing a hangover. Would you be a darling and fetch him? It will save us the trouble of tearing this beautiful ship apart." The deck was littered with a dozen wooden chests, each of them empty, so the treasure hunt must have been a smashing success. The boozy degenerate couldn't have been far behind. "What in the blue hell are you doing?" Seifert whispered. He was unbuttoning his jacket and being less than stealthy about it. One of the guards noticed the gesture, a preparatory move on Seifert's part to access his holster, and his trigger finger twitched. Malik extended his arm, palm down, lowering it ever so slightly. This was about to turn into the Wild West, and the agents were outmanned and outgunned. "Everyone relax. We're all friends here. My partner and I are with the American government." The rifles sprung to action, stocks firmly attached to the guard's shoulders. Their furious eyes peered down the iron sights. "Nice work," Seifert hissed. "That really de-escalated the situation." Movement on the upper deck. 6 more soldiers peered over the railing, assault rifles trained on the agents. From the top deck, another 3. Malik's Spanish was rusty, but he vaguely understood the screams of the man he assumed was the leader of the security team. "Get back in your helicopter or we'll feed you to the sharks" was the gist of it. Or perhaps, "we'll tear you apart as if we're sharks," which basically sent the same message. "We're doing this by the book," Seifert announced, and was halfway into his pocket before Malik realized what he was doing. Innocently reaching for his badge, no doubt, but he set off a chain reaction. A bullet sailed past his head and through the helicopter's cockpit. As the projectile passed by, a shimmering blue light radiated from Seifert, barely perceptible in the midday sun. Was this the probability field at work? It was as if the bullet had crossed from the physical realm into Schrödinger's equation. When the shooter pulled the trigger, the round could have made contact with Seifert's head. But countless variables were tossed into a quantum box: wind, trajectory, his subtle movement, the sun in the shooter's eyes. And of all the possible outcomes, the roll of the dice landed in the agent's favor. The pilot wasn't so lucky. The bullet pierced his shoulder, painting the cockpit red. His screams were muffled by the hail of gunfire. Despite the guard standing a mere 10 feet away, every bullet missed Seifert. They pocked the deck beneath his feet, picking up plumes of splinters, and drummed the side of the helicopter with a rapid-fire series of tings. A hailstorm of lead peppered Malik's torso. It's not like he was counting hits and misses, but he felt like a magnet, absorbing every shot. The bullets blew a hole clean through his shoulder and severed 3 fingers. His left ear went spiraling into the Caribbean. Thankfully, Malik's regeneration was still in perfect working order, much to the amazement of the soldiers on the main deck, who stared in rapt silence at the sight of what must have looked like a bloody corpse standing upright. He reached under his armpit and drew his Desert Eagle. The needlessly oversized hand cannon was impractical in the field, yet it could punch through an armored vest. It was worth the trade-off. He fired his weapon, and again, and then a third time. The explosive shots echoed off the water, and 3 guards went down. Seifert was gone. He disappeared up a staircase toward the second deck. Screaming followed as a guard flipped over the railing, spiking on the crown of his head. His neck broke with a sickening crack, vertebrae popping like firecrackers. The guards on the top deck were no longer pumping Malik full of lead, destroying his suit in the process. They were rounding the spiral staircase down to the second tier where Seaford was battling the rest of the security team. A soldier lunged with a machete, and Seaford ducked just in time for the blade to carry forward and cleave the forehead of another attacker. The agent disarmed a soldier and spun his assault rifle around, mowing down two others. It was dizzying to watch, like the blood-soaked finale of a Hong Kong action film playing out in fast forward. The second deck was shielded from the sunlight, making Seaford's crystal blue aura more visible. It rolled off in psychedelic waves, shifting a tiny radius of reality around him every time his life was in danger. The Grim Reaper kept spinning the roulette wheel, but John was calling the number every time. It was the moment Malik realized that if Seaford tried to kill him, if he tried to freeze him with a Foxtech bullet, encasing him in ice, there was nothing he could do to stop it. The green mystery liquid in the syringe would do God knows what. Render him unconscious for long enough to chain him up, lock him in a chest, and drop him to the ocean floor? Regeneration was helpful in a firefight, but what good would it do hundreds of fathoms below the surface? And who would ever find him? Assuming someone bothered to come looking. 747s had crashed into the ocean, their wreckages never to be seen again. The odds of locating a single human at the bottom of the Caribbean seemed vanishingly thin. Seaford dodged and swayed, avoiding blades and bullets as if they were moving in slow motion. Malik visualized his window of opportunity. It was rapidly closing. He needed to take a shot. Malik leveled his weapon. He fired. He wasn't an Olympic medalist by any stretch of the imagination, but his marksmanship was among the best in the agency. Seaford didn't make any perceptible attempt at avoiding the bullets and couldn't have seen them coming. He'd been facing the other direction. But they seemed to ghost through their target. A tight grouping of holes punched through a cabin door behind him. Staring down his sights, Malik prepared to fire again. Then Seaford turned to face him. They locked eyes and fired in unison. Malik's bullet sailed harmlessly past his target once again, shattering a window on the deck, while Seaford's bullet landed squarely in the forehead of the guard who'd been sneaking up behind Malik with a machete. Seaford rounded a staircase and returned to the main deck. The wood was splintered and battle-torn, slick with blood. "I had it covered," Seaford said. He holstered his pistol and rebuttoned his jacket. "But thanks for watching my six." He didn't have a golden hair out of place or a single drop of blood staining his suit. Conversely, Malik looked like he'd been fed through a wood chipper. His ear and mangled digits were slowly regrowing, but the hole in his shoulder was so wide you could pass your arm through it. A ray of late-afternoon sunlight slanted through the wound, painting a ragged yellow circle on the hardwood deck. His suit had been reduced to a series of blood-soaked rags, though at the moment his wardrobe was the least of his worries. In the heat of the battle, had Seaford failed to notice his partner's assassination attempt? It was entirely possible. Malik turned and acknowledged the guard that Seaford had nearly decapitated with a perfectly placed bullet just seconds ago. "Thank you for that. We're partners, right?" Seaford clapped Malik's shoulder. "We don't have to like each other, but we still carry the same shield." And with that gesture, Malik reassessed everything he'd seen on the jet. Could the bullet, the syringe, and everything else Seaford had packed for this assignment have been chosen as precautionary measures? Used to detain Finn and return him to the CIA alive and in one piece, as Amanda Cho had so succinctly put it? A gunshot rang out, followed by the distant rumble of a motor. They raced to the starboard bow in time to see Colby Finn sitting atop a cherry-red jet ski, Hawaiian shirt flapping in the wind, with a camouflage backpack slung over his shoulder. He hopped a wavelet and raised a middle finger behind him. "Oh, this cheeky bugger." Malik ejected the magazine from his Desert Eagle and fished in his pocket for a fresh one. "We have to keep this gormless tit alive, but I'll bet I can take his finger off from here." Seaford put his hand on Malik's barrel. "As much as I'd like to see that, we need to know what he has first. Let's follow him." The deck creaked underfoot as they stepped over bodies and piles of empty shells. The planks felt ready to give out, weakened by the shootout. It was amazing the yacht hadn't started to capsize. A few of the ragged puncture wounds in the once pristine floorboards were belching up little geysers of seawater. The air reeked of death, but an unmistakable aroma blended with the blood and gunpowder. Gasoline. Their helicopter had a clean, round bullet hole punched through the gas tank, draining it onto the deck. Their pilots sagged against the cockpit window, chalky white, mouth agape. Even if their chopper was airworthy, they had nobody to fly in. Seifert called in an extraction request while Malik re-examined the wooden crates stacked by the edge of the helipad. All of them empty. Hundreds of millions in gold, weighing nearly a metric ton, had vanished. Not a single coin was on the deck or stashed anywhere else on the yacht. And Finn had fled on a jet ski, carrying only the backpack on his shoulder.